increasing demand on the planet's finite resources. We have to reduce emissions urgently and take action to tackle the carbon already in the atmosphere.
Leading to a broader effort, Charles III's crusades, if you will, his God-given mission, his great work for this environmental stuff.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how devastating a global cross-border threat can be. Climate change and biodiversity loss are no different. In fact, they pose an even greater existential threat, to the extent that we have to put ourselves on what might be called a warlike footing.
And this amounts to an emergency crisis that Charles himself claims necessitates a military-style response similar to the Marshall Plan that's required to combat climate change.
Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector, with trillions at his disposal, far beyond global GDP.
And he repeated himself and doubled down, calling for a vast military-style campaign that would, quote, marshal the strength of the global private sector. Nothing short of what he calls a war against climate change.
As we tackle this crisis, our efforts cannot be a series of independent initiatives running in parallel. The scale and scope of the threat we face call for a global systems-level solution.
And of course, the solutions here are always flush with more powers for governing forces and for global bodies.
And with the greatest respect, beyond even the governments of the world's leaders.
He's called for a marshaled and deputized global private sector gathered together, but it's a war against climate change, not for corporate profits, not for greenwashing huge fortunes, nope, for climate change. A forceful nurturing from our best and brightest, from our wealthiest and most elite.
We know this will take trillions, not billions of dollars.
The then Prince Charles called for a, quote, radical new world economy to tackle climate change. He endorsed the UN's COP26 agenda and reiterated their calls to, quote, mobilize finance to the tune of raising $100 billion and above for climate action. Those are fighting words, a military-style response. And going by a detailed look at his activities, appearances, and public statements over the past few decades, Prince Charles has been building up the globe from his shadow cabinet for the vast bulk of his life. There's no real end to the committees, the awards, the series of trusts, the appearances that start with the title The Prince's Foundation, or that are connected to his friends in high finance that so frequently associate with him. As King Charles III, the former Prince of Wales is now undergoing the most literal metamorphosis possible for a human, and as such he must publicly step back from and distance himself from prior activities and boards. But today, with most of the British Empire lost since World War II to the cost of maintenance and the throne itself considered largely symbolic, King Charles III comes into his crown without any real need for it. His fellow travelers have already coated the earth with tiny ropes and the web spread strategically, planting the seeds of control for the maturing oaks of environmental jurisdiction at large. A plan for supranational, total global governance has long been underway. The, quote, sustainable and biodiverse Earth that is off limits to commoners, but held in trust by a non-elective quasi-governmental body set up by a corporate elite. It isn't pure monarchy, and Charles wouldn't hold ultimate power, but the system he's helped bring into fruition is a potent remix of the chartered powers that were stylistically typical of the crown, and which ultimately empower both plutocracy and monarchy.